What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm also going to break down some very important data that's coming out and why you should be very prepared for Jerome Powell's speech for tomorrow. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. Soft runs in just 1 day, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So, looking at Tesla, we have a nice inverse head and shoulders like structure. We're looking more bullish right now. We also managed to hold above our 20 EMA to continue this push, and we're looking pretty nice so far. The question is, what's going to happen from this point on? We do look like we want to go higher approaching deliveries, but just know there may be some complications in that because of volatility in the markets and Jerome Powell's speech. So, yes, Tesla looks bullish. I do anticipate more upside, but let's talk about some data first before I break down more details. So just know that for tomorrow, it's going to be Monday, September 30th, 2024. Please remember that before the market opens, we have Bowman giving a speech, which should be very minor. And then there are two times to watch for. 15 minutes after market open, we have the Chicago PMI report coming out. Not to mention the Dallas Fed manufacturing numbers at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So this data might cause some volatility in the markets for tomorrow, even for Tesla. So we'll see how things end up looking with that. And then we also have at 1:55 p.m. we have something very big. We have Jerome Powell, the big guy, giving a speech. What is he going to say this time? Honestly, guys, it seems like he tends to say the same things. And what's happening is these market makers and institutions are using Jerome Powell as the excuse to move things. They want to kind of like drive liquidity in and out of the markets, and Jerome Powell is the perfect excuse to do that. So I expect there to be a big drive in the markets tomorrow, whether we see a big pump and dump or even like a dump after Jerome Powell's speech, even approaching it. So get ready for his speech at 1:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. It's going to be one of the biggest market moving catalysts of the day. Now, whatever Jerome Powell says could also give us more insights about monetary policy. In my opinion, he's going to most likely just say the same things, but it still might cause quite a bit of volatility. We'll see what happens. Right now, there's about a 46.7% chance we get a 25 basis point cut and about a 53.3% chance we get 50 basis points. So we'll see what the Fed ends up doing. We're expecting another cut in November, a little bit after the election. So we'll see how that goes. Now, I also want to mention that right now the market's in a very, very interesting place. So just know that the market is at greed in terms of its sentiment, but we used to be at extreme greed. Now we're just at greed. So it's showing a little bit of a slowdown so far. Momentum used to be at extreme greed. Now we're just at greed again because the market did dip a little bit on Friday. On top of this, we also have the puts and call option ratio at extreme greed. Usually, when this happens, when we're at these lows in the puts and call option ratio, we tend to see the market basically slow down a bit. So I think there's a very, very good chance that that could be what ends up happening. So there's a good chance the market could see a little bit of a top forming for a temporary dip. I'm not saying it's going to last forever. I'm just talking about for the next couple of days. We might just dip a little bit, especially as the market's at these extremes. So please keep that in your minds. Then volatility is also at neutral. The VIX is just below its 50 daily moving average, but we do have a gap to fill above, which makes me think the market may dip a little bit. For earnings, just know we have very minor earnings for tomorrow, nothing too significant. But then for Tuesday, we have Nike and a few others, not to mention Levi's on Wednesday. But for now, earnings are minor. But earnings will get a lot more serious over the next couple of weeks as we have Tesla's earnings coming out. We have lots of big bank earnings, and the list goes on. The next earnings cycle is about to start as we're approaching the end of this quarter. Now, for Tesla, what happened with the share price? As a reminder, so the last major piece of news is this. Dan Ives and Wedbush's team have come out together, and they're saying that they believe Tesla is going to beat expectations with over 465 to 470,000 deliveries. My calculations suggest that that's very possible, but that depends a lot on China and also the USA sales. So I think that's going to be very important. I also want to mention that for them to achieve 470,000 deliveries, they need some strong USA numbers. I think that's going to be very important for them as well. So with the news that China has reduced interest rates and they cut their monetary policy, they reduced that by 50 basis points. I just want to say that with rates going down in China, that's good for Tesla. And then on top of that, you have to consider that Tesla's selling their EVs for low interest rates. That's going to be very good for Chinese sales. Chinese sales look very strong right now. I was looking at the numbers yesterday, and then their sales in the USA look pretty good. European sales look a little bit sluggish. They're just like so-so. So we'll see how that goes. To offset Europe, we need some very strong American and Chinese numbers. If we get those, we're going to be looking for a big bounce. The Chinese numbers look very strong, so that's a big check mark. But for the USA, I'm not as sure about. We'll see how the data looks over the next couple of days. But there's definitely potential for Tesla to beat on earnings. Not earnings, on deliveries. Excuse me, guys. GLJ Research is saying to sell your Tesla shares. They give it a sell rating, but Piper Sandler remains bullish with the overweight rating. Wedbush is also bullish to give Tesla an overweight rating. Price risk ratio is going up as Tesla is building a lot of strength, outperforming the market. And in terms of seasonality, Mondays do tend to be green about 53% of the time historically. That's a good sign for us. We just know that October tends to be a little bit weaker for Tesla historically. So keep that in the back of your guys' minds. Lastly, at 9 o'clock a.m., when the market opens, Tesla tends to see a lot of volatility, a lot of green, and also at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Those are the two most volatile hours for Tesla. Besides that, I'm not seeing anything else in terms of this data. Volume is at 69 million. It's a little bit low volume, but we might see a little increase because of the fact that there's anticipation of good deliveries. There might be a lot of hype that's coming up. So the question is, what's going to happen from here on out? Let me just focus on the charts from this point on, and then we will talk about how this is looking. So for Tesla, we're forming a very, very nice looking cup-like structure, which makes me suspect we're going to be going all the way up to this 268 to 270 area very soon. We have a nice accumulation. I think we could be trying to push approaching our deliveries, but just watch these supports just to be safe and these resistance levels. So if Tesla were to turn, just hypothetically, let's just say there's a bad piece of news. We have 253 as one of our main supports. So there's 256 and then 253. We got to hold 253. If we lose that on Tesla, we're at risk of dipping to 250, then 244. So you want to be very careful when it comes to that. Those are going to be your key supports. Resistance watch 262, that's where this high happened to be. If we break past 262.5, we're looking for basically 265, followed by the 270 area as our resistance zone. So the 4 hour is looking a little bit more bullish. The PPO is about to get a crossover, and then the daily chart is looking pretty good. The daily looks a little bit more bullish. I think there's potential for this to push up towards about 270. So I see potential in this. So that's going to be looking pretty good to me. The daily looks quite nice with the inverse head and shoulders, and I think that there is potential for Tesla to try to fill this gap. We actually have this gap to fill all the way up to about this 300 area. I think Tesla will achieve that as long as deliveries go well. And as long as we get a good robo-taxi event on October 10th, I think Tesla goes up to 300, by the way. I think it's very possible, but that's under the assumption of many things. As long as the robo-taxi event goes well and deliveries are good, we will be hitting 300. If not, things could become a little bit more complicated, but that's my view of Tesla for the long term. But what about the short term? What do I think is going to happen tomorrow for Tesla? We look bullish right now, but I think Tesla's going to be kind of in a tough place. So as long as we don't lose support, as long as we don't lose 260s, if we hold above that, I see 265 coming tomorrow, maybe even 267. So we might be looking for a push tomorrow morning. There's going to be a lot of hype associated with deliveries. But the issue for Tesla, and this is the predicament I'm talking about, is the fact that the market's going to likely dip. So Tesla's going to outperform the market, hold up very well. But with the market dipping, that could slow Tesla down just a bit and cause it to start to like trade sideways in a range, kind of like how it did for a lot of Friday. So tomorrow morning, look for some upside potential all the way up towards this 265 area, if not 268. Then we could be dipping back down towards 262 and just continue to trade sideways because of the overall market. And then during Jerome Powell's speech, there's no telling what's going to happen. He could try to pump things again. So Tesla could make an attempt to push all over again. But tomorrow we're looking bullish. We look like we want to be pushing for that 265 to 268 target. And then we'll see how things go from there. Overall, Tesla remains more bullish. So look for more upside before we consolidate. Now, on the other hand, despite the fact that Tesla is going to likely outperform the markets, SPY and the others are looking a little bit weaker because I say this because of the fact that our 20 EMA is not looking as strong for SPY as support. We're barely holding support. If we don't hold above 570.68 tomorrow, we're looking for 568 and then 566 as our supports near the 50 EMA. If we hold this, we have 572 as resistance, followed by 574. My gut tells me we may kind of pop a bit and start dipping all the way down to about 570, and then I think 568 to 566 is likely coming. We might be dipping all the way down towards the 568 to 566 area on SPY, but whether or not we get a bounce depends on what Jerome Powell ends up saying. So we're going to be listening to what Jerome Powell says. He's going to be the big factor for tomorrow. But I think what's going to happen is we pop a bit and start dipping all the way down to 566 to 568, all the way down to this liquidity zone before we see some buyers attempt to push us back up. There's also previous resistance becoming support at this 565 area. The previous all-time high might be tested. So look for some downside. I think a dip is coming as soon as tomorrow, if not by Tuesday, and then we'll see what happens with Jerome Powell's speech. For ES, I see the same thing. We're kind of weak right now. We're we're losing our 20 EMA. We have 5793 as a very, very important area of resistance slash previous support. If we don't hold above that, we have basically 5800 as a key level. If we fail to hold that, I think we could be dipping all the way down to about 5760. There might be a small dip coming to ES. So please be mindful of that, guys. There might be a dip coming to ES. We need to hold above 5800 or else we're at risk of coming down to 5760. My guts tells me we could retest the trend line and start dipping all the way down to about this 5760 area, all the way down to the 50 EMA before we attempt to bounce. That's the most likely case. If we hold 5800, we could turn it back to bullish. If not, we're at risk of dipping to 5760. For Nvda, we're looking more bearish. We have kind of like a head and shoulders like structure. We got to reclaim 121.19. If we fail to do so, we're at risk of dipping all the way down towards 118, then 116. The resistance at 121, not to mention 124. My gut is telling me we're going to most likely continue to fall. I think that 118 and 116 are likely coming as our support, so look for some downside on Nvidia. For Bitcoin stuck within a range. We have 66,000 as resistance and 65,000 as our support. I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin tries to push a little bit towards the 66,200 area before it starts dipping back down towards support at 65,500. Might kind of pop a bit with coin and start dipping back down to this support. If we lose 65,500, though, we're going to be dipping even lower. So I think that this could pop and drop back down to our support down here. For others out there, we have NQ, which looks a little bit more bearish to me. The reason I say that is because we're still below our 20 EMA. We have 20,250 as resistance, and then we have support all the way down here, 20,000 flat. My gut tells me this will likely continue to dip. We could rebound a little bit to 20,200 and start dipping all the way down to 20,000 flat. I think we might be testing 20,000 flat, and then whether or not we get a bounce depends on what the big guy Jerome Powell has to say. So we'll see what Powell says at 1:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll look for some downside on NQ, and we'll see how things end up developing. For the QQQ, we have basically 485.94 as our support. If that fails us, we could be tipping all the way down towards 482, then 480. And we have this resistance to watch for at 488 and then 490. So I think we could be dipping on the QQQ all the way down towards 485, followed by 482. Look for some downside that's likely coming, and we'll see how things end up developing. So be very, very patient with this nonetheless. For Aapl has resistance at this 230 area and support at 226.94. If that fails us, we're looking for 225. My gut tells me this might be dipping closer to 225 and start to consolidate. There might be a lot of consolidation coming. But the reason I say that is because we had this top here came down. We're forming wicks. We're forming another wick. This might start dipping down as it's grabbing liquidity for a small dip into the 224 area. So look for some downside potential in Aapl. For Neo, we look more bullish. We got some bullish news about a nice strategic partnership. So this could start pushing for $7. As long as we don't lose 6.5 and 6.3, I favor $7. That's the most likely case in my opinion. For Palantir, there's a possible head and shoulders like structure that is developing. So I want everyone to be very mindful of that. That this could also dip with the overall market, looking at how this trend is developing. If we end up losing our support all the way down towards 36.12, we could be dipping all the way down towards 35 flat. If we break past 36.92, we could be trying to rebound. With the head and shoulders forming, there's going to be a risk of this dipping all the way down towards 36.12, and that could lead to a little bit more downside towards the imbalance at 35. So look for the head and shoulders to potentially play out. Look for Palantir to dip, and I think we could be dipping closer to 25. For others out there, you have Supermicro. So Supermicro had some bad news. The DOJ is investigating them, and I think that that could lead to more downside in the future. However, because we dipped so hard, we have a bullish divergence here. It might attempt to rebound just a little bit for that 433 to 443 area. So the 430s could be coming before it rejects and starts dipping back down. With that being said, I think we might pop and drop as the most likely move. So watch for that. For Rivian, we're making lower highs. So we had this high here, came down. We're making lower highs again and again and again. But I think that this might get a boost thanks to the EV sector like Tesla. It might attempt to get back up to 12. And we'll see if we reject off 12 to 12.27. So look for the 12s to be coming, the low 12s, and we'll see if we get a rejection. I'll be watching that very carefully. For SoFi, this is attempting to rebound. If we hold above 8, we're looking for 8.2. If we lose 8, we're looking for 7.8, and then this could be dipping even lower. Now, you could also interpret this as the possibility of us basically forming a lower high. This could be our high here. We came down, made a lower high, and then this could dip. So it might try to pop for like 8, 8.1, and then start dipping back down for about 7.8. I think it might stay range bound for now, but there might be a pop and drop coming. Might be a little bit more upside before we see the downwards move. For the IWM, we have a very similar setup. We basically have like a high here. We came down, made a lower high. If we don't reclaim 222, we're going to likely be dipping down to 220. If that fails us, we have 218 coming for the gap fill. My gut is telling me this is going to likely be dipping all the way down towards the gap fill area for that 218 target. So look for more potential downside. For AMD, we look a little bit more bearish. We have a double top right here. If we start dipping, we're looking for 162 as our support. If that fails us, we're coming all the way down towards 160. Most have resistance at 166. I think we might be dipping down to 162 as our support. So watch for that very, very carefully. For ARM, we have a high here. We came down, made a lower high, and we're continuing to fall. We could be dipping to this imbalance towards 143. There's a good chance it starts dipping, so be very mindful of that. We also have resistance at 148. My gut tells me, however, we're dipping down to about 143, so watch for that. For Coinbase, we look more bullish. I think we could be attempting to push up for this imbalance. 195 could be coming, and we'll see if we reject or not off that. But for now, coin remains bullish. We had a very, very strong day, good volume. So it's likely not done yet. Could go a little higher for 195. We also have a gap to fill at 198. So if 195 breaks, we could get closer to 200 before we get a rejection. But look for a little bit more upside on Coinbase. For Amazon, we look more bearish. Why? Because we're losing our 50 EMA. We need to reclaim 188s to bounce back up to 191. If we don't hold above 188, we're likely dipping all the way down to about 185. The odds favor 185 to 184 is coming, but we'll have to see based off 188. For Meta, there's a head and shoulders like structure. We could try to pop for about the 570 area before we try to dip back down. If 564 fails us, we're dipping all the way down to about 560. Look for a pop and drop, and we'll see how 560 ends up treating it. But look for that potential downside move as a stronger possibility. So I think we might pop a bits tomorrow morning, then start dipping as time goes on. Then Jerome Powell's speech will be another factor, but I think we may dip approaching it. Microsoft looks more bearish. We need to reclaim 431 to turn back up. If not, we're at risk of coming down to about 424. Why do I say that? We like to form these domes again and again and again, and we have an imbalance to fill down here too. So it's kind of dragging us lower. So if this support breaks at 426, I think 424 is our next target. Microsoft looks more bearish to me nonetheless. Google's tricky. So we have like a double top like structure, which does technically favor downside, but it depends on if we hold below 165 or not. So if we break 165, we could try to bounce. If not, we have a gap to fall all the way down to 163. My gut tells me that 163 is very, very favorable. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. I think we might be looking for a double top rejection. So watch and see if that ends up happening. For a few more, TJT has 15.11 as resistance. If that breaks, we're looking for basically the 16 area. And if we end up losing support and reject off 15.11, we're looking for dip back down to 14.16. My gut tells me we could be pushing for about 15.11, but I'm not sure if we'll break that. If we don't do it, we're looking for a dip back down to about 14.16. I think it may pop and then drop back down, so watch for that very carefully. And the VIX is trying to rebound. We have a gap to fill up closer to 18. My gut is telling me that the VIX is going to try to bounce off this bullish divergence and it's going to try to fill the gap above. This signifies that the market may dip, causing the VIX to basically bounce. So watch for that very, very carefully. For the 10-year, we're kind of dipping right here. We have some gaps to fill below. We'll see what Jerome Powell causes. That's going to be a very, very big factor. And then the dollar is forming a bullish divergence. So if we have a bullish divergence in the dollar, we held support at 100. So it might try to rebound for 100.6 to 101 points. I'm sorry, 100.74. So we might be pushing back up to about 100.6 at the least. And then that could be signifying that the market's going to be dipping. The market seeing a dollar that's pushing may cause the market to also see downside. So that's going to be a very, very important factor. I think what's going to happen is the market's going to slow down a bit, but Tesla's going to outperform the market, try to push for 265. Then we might see some consolidation in the high 260s just for some time before we see a much bigger move. There might be a lot of hype approaching our deliveries, so I can't wait to see what Tesla does. But look for a little bit more upside in the daytime, some sideways price action as the day goes on. And then another factor, at least for later on during the day, is going to be Jerome Powell. Tesla may kind of like pop approaching Jerome Powell and hold up, the market may slow down a bit approaching Powell, and then whether or not we get a bounce depends on what he says. So always keep that in mind. Technicals show we may dip approaching Jerome Powell, by the way, and then we'll see what happens with his words, whatever he has to say about the economy and the markets. We'll be very, very patient nonetheless. So that being said, guys, I want to thank you all so much for listening. Please enjoy some football today, enjoy sports, enjoy family, enjoy life, and please have a great day, night, or evening wherever you guys are around the world. I'll be back tomorrow before the market opens to give you guys some updates on what's happening with the PMI reports, not to mention like manufacturing and such. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, please be very, very safe out there. Please have a lot of fun and do what's best for your own portfolios. And I'll be back for another update until then. The last thing is my Mumu link. This is going to be expiring tomorrow. So if you're interested, you could sign up and deposit your money to get those free stocks. If not, it's totally up to you guys. So that's pretty much it for the video. Thank you for listening. Have a great weekend and peace out.